Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well because we've got a lot to cover today. There's a massive storm system heading toward the United States as we move into next week, and this one is shaping up to bring a whole variety of dangerous weather. We're talking about a serious risk of severe storms, including damaging winds, large hail, and the potential for strong tornadoes. On top of that, more snowfall is on the way for parts of the Midwest and stretching into the Northeast. And if that wasn't enough, we're also looking at another blast of cold air sweeping across most of the country, both this weekend and then into next week. There's so much happening on the weather front right now. And in today's forecast, we're going to break down exactly what you need to know about the storm systems and the changing weather conditions that are going to impact the U.S. over the next couple of weeks. But before we get into the details, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. Let's start by taking a look at what's going on across the country right now. Honestly, today's one of those rare days where the weather is pretty calm and pleasant across most of the nation. It's some of the best weather we've seen all year. Very little activity happening right now, especially across the Great Plains in the Southeast where things are extremely quiet. But there is one exception. Snow is already moving through parts of the Midwest and the Great Lakes region. Now, this snow band is actually pretty impressive. Parts of the upper peninsula of Michigan could see as much as 12 inches of snowfall by the time the system wraps up. That's a foot of snow in some areas, definitely significant for those regions. However, aside from that, this particular system isn't expected to be very impactful overall. As it moves eastward into the Northeast later tonight and into tomorrow, it'll bring some light to moderate snowfall, but nothing quite as heavy as what's hitting the upper peninsula right now. Meanwhile, over on the West Coast, things are relatively calm for the moment, but that's not going to last long. We're expecting conditions to get much more active as we head into the weekend and through next week across much of the lower 48 states. So if you're enjoying the quiet weather right now, soak it in because it's going to change fast. And before we go any further, just a quick heads up, if my voice sounds a little off today, that's because I'm feeling under the weather myself. I'm pretty congested, so if you're noticing something weird with the audio, don't worry, it's not your speakers. It's just me. Thanks for bearing with me. The forecast must go on. Now let's dive into the severe weather potential for next week, and I can't stress enough how unusual and significant this setup is. Starting on Tuesday, we're already seeing some alarming signals from the Storm Prediction Center. They've issued an enhanced risk for severe weather, and that's incredibly rare this far out. In fact, this is only the 8th time in history that we've seen a Day 6 enhanced risk issued, and it's the first time ever we've seen one in the month of February. That tells you just how serious and unique this setup really is. The area we're most concerned about is the Mississippi River Valley. That's where the greatest concentration of severe weather is expected, even we're not just talking about your run-of-the-mill thunderstorms. This has the potential to be a widespread and robust severe weather event. We're looking at a high risk for damaging straight-line winds, large hail, and even strong tornadoes. And this system's impact zone is pretty extensive. The slight risk area stretches all the way into parts of Illinois and Texas, and I wouldn't be surprised if we eventually see a marginal threat extending even farther north into central Illinois, Indiana, and Missouri as we get closer to the event. With everything we're seeing right now, this storm could very well end up being one of the most intense and dangerous severe weather outbreaks we've had all year. So if you're in any of the areas I just mentioned, now is the time to start preparing. Stay weather aware, have your emergency plan in place, and keep checking for updates because this system is shaping up to be very serious, so make sure you're subscribed and ready for updates. But the severe weather threat doesn't end on Tuesday. It keeps going into Wednesday, shifting eastward. And what's especially unusual about this is that we're seeing a slight risk for severe storms stretching from New Jersey all the way down into Georgia and Florida. That's not something you often see in early March, and it's yet another indicator of how powerful and far-reaching the system is. Just like on Tuesday, the primary threats on Wednesday will be damaging winds, large hail, and the potential for tornadoes. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe this could be the first time North Carolina has ever had a Day 6 or Day 7 slight risk for severe weather, which just goes to show how rare this setup really is. And one of the big reasons the storm system is so concerning is the upper level dynamics in play. We're going to see a lot of upper level divergence, which basically means there's going to be a lot of lift in the atmosphere. And that lift is one of the key ingredients needed for severe storm development. When we look at the forecast for Tuesday evening, we're seeing incredibly strong upper-level winds over the Mississippi River Valley in Texas. That alignment between the upper-level winds and the expected thunderstorm coverage is exactly the kind of setup you need for a significant severe weather outbreak. And this kind of upper-level support isn't something you see with every storm. It's one of the reasons why this event has so much potential for strong and long-lived storms. This active weather pattern isn't going away anytime soon either. We're expecting the potential for more severe weather and active storms continuing right through the middle of March. And we'll talk more about that in future forecasts as we get closer. As we look ahead to how this system plays out, things start ramping up by Monday evening when instability begins building across the southern plains. The good news is that severe weather risk on Monday itself looks pretty low, close to zero. But by Tuesday, that instability really takes off. And what's striking here is how far north it's expected to reach, stretching into Missouri, Illinois, Iowa, and even parts of Kansas. One of the more concerning possibilities for Tuesday is a cold core severe weather setup. This could lead to the development of a few tornadoes back in Missouri and Illinois, though right now that's a more conditional risk. The greater and more widespread threat lies farther south, across the deep south and lower Mississippi Valley, where we're anticipating numerous damaging wind reports, large hail, and potentially several tornadoes. By Wednesday, the severe weather threat pushes eastward, with damaging winds becoming the primary concern along the East Coast. But we also can't rule out a few tornadoes here as well. And as the storm system pulls away, the backside of the low-pressure system will bring gusty winds and snow to parts of the Midwest and Great Lakes. Speaking of snow, the biggest snowfall event over the next couple weeks will hit the upper peninsula of Michigan, with up to 10 inches possible. Northern Michigan will see some lighter accumulations, but most of the heavy snow will stay concentrated in that region. As we move toward mid-March, the chances for additional snowfall drop off sharply for much of the southern plains and southeast. Winter's basically over in those areas, at least when it comes to snow. But the northern and central plains, Midwest, and Northeast will likely see a few more rounds of snow before the season wraps up. We're also tracking instability. And while it's early March and harder to get those higher energy levels this far north, we're still seeing plenty of areas with the storm energy needed for severe weather. And where you see those green and yellow zones, that's where we've got over 1,000 joules per kilogram of energy, more than enough for big storms. The low-level jet is also going to be cranking. And that's a huge part of what helps storms organize and produce tornadoes. By Tuesday afternoon and evening, we're seeing winds over 60 knots just a couple thousand feet above the surface. And as the sun sets, those winds strengthen even more, especially over Louisiana, Arkansas, Mississippi, and Alabama. That's where we could see the greatest risk for strong long-track tornadoes. Storms will likely start firing Tuesday morning over North Texas and Oklahoma, bringing hail and some damaging wind gusts. But the real outbreak will kick off around midday with storms developing near Little Rock, Fort Smith, Texarkana, and the Dallas-Fort Worth area. By Tuesday afternoon and evening, we'll likely see a squall line form with embedded supercells. And those embedded cells will have a high risk of producing tornadoes. As we move into Wednesday, March 5th, the severe weather threat shifts east. Dew points in the 50s and 60s will push up into the Carolinas, Georgia, and Florida. And even though there won't be quite as much instability, the strong low-level jet will more than make up for it. Storms will likely weaken a bit early Wednesday morning, but should fire back up by the afternoon, bringing the risk of damaging winds, hail, tornadoes, and flash flooding. And let's not forget about the cold side of this storm. As the system matures and moves toward the Great Lakes, we're going to see a narrow band of heavy snow. Areas like Kansas, eastern Nebraska, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and possibly northern Illinois could see several inches of snow. And once the system moves into southeastern Canada, places like Ontario and Quebec could pick up a foot or more. Rainfall is also going to be a big issue, especially in places like Kentucky where the soil is already saturated from recent flooding. We're looking at 1 to 3 inches of rain across parts of the eastern U.S., and it won't take much to trigger flash flooding. So if you're in a flood-prone area, make sure you know your evacuation routes and never drive through flooded roads. That's all I've got for you today, but trust me, this is a storm system we have to keep an eye on. I'll be back tomorrow with more updates on the severe weather potential and snowfall amounts, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss any of it. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and share it with as many people as possible so everyone can stay informed and safe. And of course, leave any comments, questions, or concerns below. I always love hearing from you. Stay safe out there. See you in the next one.